Other interesting cultural news, you have Bud Light UFC Boycott Begins, and the fans are canceling their subscriptions. Now, this is because Dana White, in his infinite wisdom, he thought, that's a good idea. This is a good brand. Bud Light. Let's partner with them, with the UFC. They share our values, says Dana White. His logic in that statement is that Bud Light employs thousands of Americans, such as farmers, which is a statement that pertains to every Fortune 500 company on the planet out there. Every large company employs millions of Americans. That's why they're large. That's not very unique to Bud Light. They employ farmers specifically. I suppose that's a little more unique, but think of just any large food company. They could say the same thing. General Mills, Kellogg's. I mean, all those plant-based foods that people are putting in their bodies these days, they all employ lots of farmers. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's not a unique value add for Dana White to ride home about, so to say. So I'm not sure why he's bragging about that or trying to use that as a way of saying that's a good idea to do this thing. Again, Bud Light, they're losing hundreds of millions of dollars, literally, because of the Bud Light boycott has persisted because they thought on April 1st, coincidence or not, it was hilarious they chose that day to reveal their sponsorship of their marketing campaign with Dylan Mulvaney, who is a controversial trans activist who has a whole controversy for another time perhaps, but this individual was celebrating what this individual claimed to be 365 days of womanhood. This person was born a biological man, and Bud Light gave this person a custom can, which incidentally enough is perhaps the most expensive, valuable piece of business merchandise in history because of the fiscal impact it's had on Bud Light. Obviously not for good reasons, because their sales, Q2 alone, literally lost $400 million in sales, just evaporated compared to the same fiscal Q2 last year. And again, I'm not a doctor, but if you click subscribe, it could fix my stuttering. Perhaps it's slowly gotten better, and the subscriber count has precipitously increased. Coincidence? I don't think so. But let's try together and find out. Now, Bud Light is scrambling. They are saying they're going to spend more on marketing than ever before in a futile attempt, I believe, to actually buy back some of their customers. I say futile because it's like a bad relationship. When one person messes up, and instead of apologizing or acknowledging the elephant in the room, or in this case, a Dylan Mulvaney in the room, they're just throwing gifts at their partner. Which, again, a gift without sentiment or authenticity is nothing more than a rudimentary bribe. Doesn't change the situation, really. In fact, I would argue it actually makes the situation worse because this person thinks they can just buy back your loyalty or buy back your opinion just because they're throwing a knick-knack at you. And in this case, they have all these sweepstakes, like the Bud Light sweepstakes, where you could win a case of Bud Light, which is perhaps a good real-life example. Again, many times in marketing, you have to deal with metaphors. But in this case, it's a great example of how you can be a winner and a loser at the same time, because you could win a case of Bud Light if you retweet that little sweepstakes handle. Which, again, would be the question of the year. What would you do if you won a case of Bud Light? I mean, one of my favorite examples that I've thought of on the show is you could use it as ballast if you're in a hot air balloonist, in which you could actually, instead of having sandbags, you could actually tie the case of Bud Light to your little basket that you ride in, and if you need to go higher, just cut that case of Bud Light off. Now, it will subsequently fall to the ground, and it might hit someone in the head. However, you could argue that it is less detrimental to the person's health than actually drinking the product and consuming the product. That very well may be true. In terms of, what would I do if I won a case of Bud Light? As I continue to think of, maybe we can make a whole video on this, 100 things to do if you win the case of Bud Light. I can't help but think, what would I do? You could use it. I think someone in the comments actually had the recommendation. You could use it to refill your toilet. If you have a water outage but you still need to flush, you can actually put the Bud Light in the reservoir, which would be able to actually encompass the function of the toilet, so you still flush. Now, I can only imagine the smell would be unbearable because, again, it's Bud Light. You could also, although not recommended, use it as a blunt object for home defense. Although the judge very well may argue it's cruel and unusual punishment if someone were to break into the house and you were to hit them with a Bud Light, because there's a risk. It's not a 0% risk. There's a true percent risk that if you bludgeon someone with a Bud Light, which I do not recommend, you could fracture the can and cause Bud Light to expel from the can, which subsequently could fall into the burglar's mouth. And they very well might sue you because the taste is so abhorrent that it could be a long-term detrimental to this person's mental health. So perhaps that is the 11th real thing you could do, although I do not recommend if you were to win the case of Bud Light. Now, nevertheless, getting back to the substance of this specific article, it's coming from Newsweek, and they're saying that the UFC fans are canceling their subscriptions left and right due to this. And they note a series of all these responses on social media. Now, again, it'll be fascinating to see what the fiscal impact is on the company. I believe they are a new privately held corporation because you have the WWE that merged with the UFC. So now they are known as, what is it? Not Knockout Industries, that would have been too clever. What is it? They are known as a new entity, and I believe they are privately held. So they don't have to, unlike a publicly traded company where, like, if you go to PepsiCo, you can buy their stock today. They get every quarter, you see the results, you can see their 10K. Now, in terms of the actual UFC, let's see. That falls down to TKO operating. Okay. So if you go TKO operating, I'm pretty sure it's privately held. I'm going to double check now. Who owns TKO Holdings? Oh, no. Really, it's owned 51% by Endeavor Group Holdings, which owns assets including UFC and Hollywood Talent Agency, WWE, and 49% owned by WWE shareholders. So actually, it is publicly TKO. It looks like it is publicly traded. So actually, now I'm curious, what is their stock doing these days? TKO. So interesting enough, it looks like it's been a couple weeks. Their stock is actually up by 3%. Now, granted, it goes up to, that means it's about $86 per share. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, they're still rated as a strong buy from a couple of these stock analysts. So it'll be interesting to see how many people actually canceled to the point where it has a fiscal impact on the company. Now, again, we're dealing with anecdotal evidence today. We're going to talk about some specific tweets from some folks and responses. So a lot of people are saying they're going to cancel, but the truth is in the pudding, something to that effect. So it'll be interesting to see how that translates to actual sales, because there are some instances, as you know, where people will say, oh yeah, I'm going to boycott that, and they never actually do. They just talk about it, which is ridiculous and two-faced, I would also argue. Now, some of the fans are saying, these are specific quotes, quote, I'm canceling my subscription and never buying any pay-per-view fights anymore until this sponsorship is gone. This is the worst deal UFC has ever made, unquote. Now, physically speaking, I don't know how accurate that'll be, since, again, the rumor is they're getting about $100 million from Bud Light to do this. Which, from Dana's White perspective, I can't help but think they could have got a lot more. Because Bud Light, they've dug themselves so deep in a hole, they can't even see the ground anymore. The bar is so low, it's below ground. And, again, Anheuser-Busch InBev, the parent company of Bud Light, they said publicly, we're going to spend more on marketing than ever before. We're going to basically try to buy ourselves out of this situation. And in terms of trying to reach their main audience, which used to be, I would argue, for the most part, I mean, there's a frat community or fraternity community. You had a lot of heterosexual males. I believe those are probably some of their used to be their top demographics. Not so much these days, as they alienated them so perfectly. And they actually alienated people on the left and middle as well, since they did not, quote-unquote, stick with Dylan Mulvaney. So many sides of the political and cultural aisle have boycotted this brand. Now, because the UFC is a very unique business, there's not a lot of competition. There's Bellator, but if you want to watch the UFC, it is a very unique sport. It's not like the sports balls where if you don't like, who's the sports ball teams? If you don't like the Patriots, you can watch the Cowboys. Well, perhaps that metaphor doesn't stand actually, since the NFL is pretty much the dominating thing in that regard. The only other competition really for NFL, competition. Now that I think about it, no, metaphor still stands. Situation still stands. There are many sports balls games. If you want to see these balls being thrown around, there are many options. If you want to see people fight, I think there are more. It's a little bit more of a limitation on that. And UFC is a very unique situation in and of itself. So I can't help but think Dana White could have asked him for $200 million. They probably would have said yes, because they're so desperate to reach that audience that they alienated so much. They'd certainly be willing to pay a premium on that. So it'll be interesting to see what other comments do we have. Another person says, quote, "How can you explain your pathetic Bud Light sponsorship? What you doing? Grammar be damned. I'm going to reread this as is exactly written, or attempt to. Again, from the beginning, quote, how about you explain your pathetic Bud Light sponsorship? How you doing going rainbow uniforms next? Canceling my UFC Fight Pass subscription," unquote. Now, again, I mean, I don't know what the stipulations are to the contract that Dana White signed with Bud Light, but, I mean, he could have really played this differently to have a different impact on the sport. Again, Dana White's known for being very against politics, and if anything, you probably venture to say he's a little bit more on the right in the political aisle. Trump famously would go to UFC events, and a lot of his fans are there. And again, those are not the people that are drinking Bud Light these days. So I can't help but think Dana White could have easily signed the contract, and he could have just come out the next day and said, "Hey, this is a great deal for the fighters. All of our fighters are getting, bigger salaries, bigger health benefits. Spin it however you want, and just say, yeah, we got their money." But again, this looks like he's bending the knee to Bud Light, saying, "Oh yeah, they share our values." Which, again, Bud Light was one of the first companies to invest in the company known as UFC. They were one of the first sponsors originally. That Bud Light is a brand that no longer exists, basically, because they've so destroyed their brand. No one sees them the same way, in the same light. The light has many more colors, some might say. So I can't help but think Dana should have just said, "Oh yeah, you know what? We did it for the money. Sue me, you got the contract. I can say whatever I want." So I wonder if there's a morality clause or some type of clause in the contract that says Dana White can't talk smack about the UFC. Or rather, he can't talk smack about Bud Light. That'd be interesting to see. Again, I don't know if we'll ever see the actual contract, but it'd be fascinating to see how that actually handles it. Now, another person says, quote, "I just canceled my ESPN Plus subscription. I used to buy every pay-per-view, but this is the last straw," unquote. Another person said, quote, "Cancel my UFC Fight Pass subscription. Enjoy your Bud Light. Hope it was worth it," unquote. Another fan accused the UFC of, quote, "will do anything to grow, but they don't want to be a part of it. They theorize that the partnership would do good, but we're walking away," unquote. Grammar is such a nuanced thing. It'd be really nice if Twitter and all these social media sites, well, it'd be nice if public schools actually taught kids something, but we know that's not going to happen in most cases. But it'd be fascinating to see if some of these websites actually had like built-in tools so you can actually check your grammar for you and your spelling. That'd be much appreciated by, well, perhaps not millions of people, but I'd say a fair couple, including myself. But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Now, going over to the political part of the podcast, you have Vivek Ramaswamy critiquing the mainstream media's lack of accountability and going viral. Now, this is specifically coming from his Twitter account, and this is a brief 34-second clip, and he actually does have a little text before it. So the text before the clips is from Vivek saying, quote, "This is exactly what MSM does. Obsess over some irrelevant detail about some random Trump comment while totally abdicating from their responsibility for systematically lying to the public for the last 5 years. The lack of self-awareness is astounding," unquote. And he does get 5 points for using a fancy word such as abdicated. That's one of my favorite ones. I appreciate that. And this is for him being on CNN. And he already has near 1 million views. And without further ado, I will play the actual clip.
Have a dual standard of justice in this country. One standard applied.
But Trump is using the word hostages. Do you think that they're hostages?
For the prior 2 years.
Isn't that irresponsible to call them hostages with what's going on in Israel right now?
I mean, Jim, let me just be really clear about what's irresponsible as it relates to coverage of Donald Trump. And I think that your network and others like you owe some accountability here. From the Russia collusion hoax that never was, to the Hunter Biden laptop story that was actually real before the election were told that it was false. So I think that the real accountability here belongs to the media.
Very true. And in fact, what was it, 51? There are more than, well, what was it, 51, 54? There are many people who are like former CIA operatives or former government officials or federal employees where they swore that the whole thing was true, that the laptop rather was a hoax. It wasn't real. And then of course now we know it was real. Hunter was that dumb to leave his laptop with sensitive data at a computer repair shop. Now, I can't help but think that is the most moronic decision a person can make in their life. Granted, he's inebriated a majority of his life when you look at his recreational activities. So I guess we shouldn't be too surprised. I'll be interested to see, again, there's a lot of parallels between Vivek and Trump when their critique of the mainstream media, and I think it's going to help because I think a lot of people, in terms of moves on the political chessboard, there's a lot of people in the middle who really, they see the discrepancies and they see the mainstream media not like they're really doing their job anymore. They're not breaking stories. They're nothing, in many cases, it's not more than a copy-paste of the government, just saying whatever they want to them to say. I mean, perhaps the most prime example is look at the U.S. press secretary briefings, or you see, I think Peter Doocy's the one person who asks one tough question a day to the White House press secretary. I mean, all the other ones are the most softball questions on the planet. It's almost reminiscent of when you were in public school as a child, where you and your buddies all in agreement when you had a book report, where you wouldn't ask any hard questions when your buddy would go up there and give his report, and it just understood that that's how everyone would get a good grade, because no one asked a question that actually makes you know you read the book or actually challenges you. It's oddly reminiscent of that if you watch the White House press secretary. Now going over to the comments section, and again, this got 843,000 views and 15,000 likes within the course of 48 hours. Now, A.Z. Anderson's, one of the top responses, says, quote, "Your strategy of running against Trump while supporting all his policies and promising to take them even further is inspired. CNN has to have you on because you're running, quote-unquote, against Trump, but you hit them with the truth," unquote, getting 45 likes. It's not rocket science. It says, quote, "Cartoon News Network, kudos to Vivek for spending time on these clowns," unquote, getting 62 likes. Someone by the name of DV says, quote, "Love to see constipated look on Acosta's face as you dress him down," unquote, getting 45 likes. Someone by the name of Steve says, quote, "This is absolutely off base. The MSN has been lying to American people for a lot longer than 5 years. Come on, man. I'm just saying," unquote, getting 18 likes. Someone by the name of Kyle says, quote, "Thank God for Vivek. You may think he's fake or just say what sounds good, but he's saying it. He's putting himself on the line. He's speaking the truth. Mad love from Texas for standing up," quote unquote, getting 56 likes. Let's see here. Somebody by the name of Brian Johnson did a meme of Joseph Goebbels. Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong my whole life. I thought it was Goebbels, but it doesn't look like there's an R in there. But nevertheless, he actually has a meme where he has the Joseph from the Nazi Party saying, quote, "Accuse the other side of what you were doing." And it was Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda administrator, getting 8 likes. Which I can't but notice that's more and more in politics. They accuse the other side of what they're doing more and more and more. Let me know what your favorite example of that is in the comments. Let's see. I'm trying to see if there's any contrarian statements. Spearhead Video says, quote, "I'm constantly impressed by Mr. Ramaswamy. He is what is in store for America in the near future. It is, of course, if Americans know what's good for them," unquote, getting 2 likes. Let's see. So it looks like overwhelming positive responses. So it'll be interesting to see how this helps him out in the polls as he continues to slowly but surely climb up the ladder, or climb up the polls, as the competition for the Republican nominee, they precipitously seem to go down more and more. Be fascinating to see, but time shall tell. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to tune in today. Again, trying to get to 4,000 subscribers by the end of November, so if you could click that button, I would greatly appreciate it. Also, leaving a comment is a great way to give me feedback specifically and how I can help improve the show. Thanks to everyone clicking the subscribe button. The stuttering perhaps is getting a little bit better. Again, I'm no Mayo Clinic scientist, but every time you click the button for the subscribe, I think it makes the stutter go away just a little bit more. And in time, perhaps we'll see that theory come to fruition. But again, thank you, everyone, for taking the time to tune in. Don't forget to take the time to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe, fight the good fight.